But I just wanted to thank everybody for coming today. My name is Kim Jenkins, and I'm a pediatric speech-language pathologist in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I am also the mom of two boys who are both in college. One is a junior, and the other one is a freshman. So they both go to college in Georgia. And my journey with all of this started when I've been a speech-language pathologist for 26 years, but my oldest son, when he was 15 months old, we became aware that he had some sensory issues. So he went through occupational therapy and was diagnosed with sensory integration disorder. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but you know how diagnoses change all the time. So we went through occupational therapy, and he was not really talking, he wasn't really babbling, he was a late talker, and truthfully looking back, I really think he was a Gestalt Language Processor. I need to pull up my old videos because back then I wasn't even aware that this was a thing. I knew that children communicated through echolalia, but years ago we were taught to ignore that. And so he did need speech therapy, he got physical therapy, he went through social skills therapy. We never went through a formal autism diagnosis. That can be really expensive, and truthfully, I was probably a parent in denial back then. I got him all the services he needed. I didn't even know about ABA, but he is now doing really well in college. And he does still have some social anxiety, but he kind of turned a corner when he went to high school and found his niche, which was orchestra. And so he's got his core group of friends and is doing really well. So that's really what got me interested in autism, truthfully. And I really became passionate about it when I started working at a public school that had 6 autism classrooms. And I was honestly that wasn't my passion, but I had an amazing teacher that I worked with, and she taught me everything I know about autism, and later on I learned about Gestalt Language Processing. So that's kind of a long way of me telling you how I got into this. So this is one of my clients. His name is Jake, and when I started with him, he was in stage 1. He is now in stage 4. He's 3 years old. And so you'll get to hear a video of him, and we're going to talk about the stages today as well. Oh, sorry. So that was my story. So these are some of my other clients. This is RJ in the middle. He's a stage 1 Gestalt Language Processor. He has a lot of sensory needs, and so you get to hear a video clip of him today. And this is Sanvi. She's a stage 5 Gestalt Language Processor, and she was recently diagnosed autistic. So all of the kids in my videos have been diagnosed autistic, and you're going to hear me use you're going to hear me use identity first language today. So I don't know if all of you are familiar with that, but some people prefer to say person with autism, because years ago we would say, well, they're a person first, they have the autism. But now we listen to autistic adults, and I'm sure this is going to change in a year or two, but autistic adults who say, we are autistic, you can't change that. If you call us person with autism, that means there's something wrong with us, that we have a medical problem, and we don't. It's just a different neurotype. So in this presentation, you're going to hear me say autistic when I'm talking about the kids I work with. Of course, you always want to ask the families you work with, what do you prefer that I call, how do you prefer that I refer to Jake? Would you like me to say person with autism or autistic? So, and then we also say non-speaking instead of nonverbal, because nonverbal implies that the child doesn't have any language, but non-speaking means they just don't have mouth words, or they have a minimal amount of mouth words. So you'll hear me use that terminology as well. So I just wanted to go through that. All right, so these are the resources that I'm going to use. If you guys want to take a picture of that. And of course at the end I reference everything, but Natural Language Acquisition on the Autism Spectrum is a book by Marge Blanc. I will be honest, it's a great resource, but if you're not a speech-language pathologist, and even if you are a speech-language pathologist, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But it's still an amazing resource, and that is one of the resources I use to write my ebook that I'll talk about also in this presentation. Marge Blanc has a lot of amazing courses on Gestalt Language Processing on Northern Speech Services website. So you can purchase those, sometimes they go on sale. My ebook is something that I wrote for parents just to streamline all 6 of the stages of Gestalt language development that I'll talk about today. And that just helps parents to know how they can best support their child on the spectrum and support their language. So I have a TikTok account, which is crazy that that's how Christy found me for this. It just blows my mind that she invited me to come speak here. It's crazy, but so the TikTok I started, I'm actually a certified life coach. So I wanted to coach parents of children on the spectrum because I know as a parent of a child with special needs, it is very overwhelming, it's exhausting, and I wanted to provide a place that I could support parents and maybe be positive for them. But most people seem to want to know more about Gestalt language development. So that's the direction that my social media has gone. But that's why I created this guide, because I had so many parents reaching out to me from different places around the world that did not have access to speech pathologists in their area who supported Gestalt language development. So it's very straightforward and just walks you through all 6 stages. The Meaningful Speech course by Alex Zakos is also amazing. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but that is meaningfulspeech.com, and that is really how I started to learn about Gestalt language development. And all of this is based on research by Barry Bruzant, Lillian Stiegler, and Ann Peters, and it all originated in the 1970s. So just wanted to let you guys know that. I also apologize if I'm talking too fast, so I try really hard to. You would think being in the South that I would talk slower, but no, I talk really fast. So I would love a show of hands of how many of you are familiar with Gestalt language. Okay, so it looks like we've got a few. That's great. How many of you have students who use echolalia to communicate? Okay, great. So Gestalt language is actually delayed echolalia. So we're going to walk through all of that today. And you're going to hear it called Gestalt, It's okay. No matter what you say, it's fine. I call it Gestalt because I just do it like the girl in Meaningful Speech, but I'm not particular about that. All right, so we're going to talk about the 2 types of echolalia. The first one is immediate echolalia. So that is when your child repeats you in the present moment. So if you say, would you like a ball? They might say, would you like a ball? Right then. Or they might say ball and just repeat part of your utterance. That is called immediate echolalia. This is something that even typical children will go through, but if it persists past the age of 3, then we know that that is an indicator that they might need to have a speech evaluation. Delayed echolalia is also known as scripting, and that is where your child is going to repeat lines from a TV show, a song, a movie, a previous conversation. So we're going to look at some examples of that. So, many Gestalt language processors will use immediate echolalia, and this can indicate that a student is trying to process the language, they're trying to commit it to memory. So a lot of times you're going to see this in the early stages of Gestalt language development, and it is going to minimize as the child's language grows. So that is the first type of echolalia, and the second type is the delayed. So delayed echolalia has a purpose for the child. We've always been taught to ignore it, but today we're going to get into the reasons why we don't want to use that. But at the foundation of a Gestalt Language Processor's language development, this is how they acquire language, through delayed echolalia. And it's brilliant that somebody figured that out all these years ago. So you might have for example, I'm going to give you an example of one of my kids. This is Harris up here. He is 5 now. What he used to use when he was tired, he would say, blue blanket. So that was a gestalt or a script that he would use to mean that he was tired. Now, to the average person who didn't know much about his language, they might think, oh, blue blanket, he just wants a blue blanket. But when you start to be a detective and look into your child's language development and figure out, what do they mean by that? His mom figured out that's what he means every time he's tired. So we're going to talk about some more examples of that today, but that's an example of delayed echolalia. So, what is an analytic language processor? There are 2 ways to acquire language. The first one is through analytic language development. Chances are most of us in this room are analytic language processors. So these are children who vocalize when they're babies. They will babble. They will first use words to communicate. So they might say ball. And then they're going to expand on that and say big ball or a ball. Then they're going to get into phrases. A big ball. Sentences. The big ball rolled. And then they're going to get into storytelling and then grammar. Their intonation will develop as their language develops, but their intonation is not as rich as the Gestalt Language Processors is. So that is an example of an analytic language processor. Now the interesting thing is that you may think, wow, Gestalt Language Processor, that's disordered language, but it's not. This is also a very typical way to acquire language. You can be a Gestalt Language Processor and not be autistic. Some kids move, there are 6 stages that we'll talk about today, but when a child is autistic, typically they get stuck in stages 1 or 2. And that's why you're going to hear so much scripting. Now, they'll always script if they're autistic. If they are a Gestalt Language Processor, they're always going to script to some degree or another. But that does minimize as their language grows, as they advance in the stages. But there can be things that trigger the scripting, like I even had a mom just now, this mom, she texted me this morning, her child's in stage 4. And she said, Jake is starting to script like crazy. It's almost like we've had a setback. But this does happen, where things like dysregulation, I don't know if you're all familiar with dysregulation, but that's where your child's central nervous system is not in the optimal learning zone. So you might see your child pacing. You might see your child overstimulated, falling apart, rocking more, doing things to seek sensory input or to avoid sensory input, falling apart, having meltdowns. So that can be a sign if there's been any kind of a change in the family routine, like mom's been out of town, or there's a new baby, or anything like that, a growth spurt. There can be lots of things that will trigger the increase in the scripting, but it does ebb and flow. So that's something to not be worried about, because of course it's also something we can't control. We do know that once they're a Gestalt Language Processor, they will always script to some degree or another. And I worked with, when I was in the school system, there was an adult male that was, I think 28, and he was one of our janitors. And he would script in the hall often, and he would sing. But he was a stage 6 Gestalt Language Processor. He could carry on a full-blown conversation with you. So scripting is part of it, and that's something to be aware of. So a Gestalt Language Processor, these are kids that are known as intonation babies. So you're going to hear very rich intonation, and you'll hear it in some of the video clips that I'll show you today. They are often labeled as late talkers. They might be, I've got a little boy right now on my caseload who's 3. Actually, he's about to be on my caseload, but I worked with him a little bit when he was younger, and then his mom, since I'm private pay, needed to go through insurance. But they'll often have single 1 million single words, right? But they don't know what to do with those words. They are sure they can label things, but when you are a Gestalt language processor, you don't need more words, you need more scripts. So we're going to talk today about scripts that you can give your child to help them with their language. So delayed echolalia is how a Gestalt language processor learns, and they're going to produce long strings of words that serve as a single unit of meaning. So for example, the little boy Harris I was talking about would say blue blanket, and that was a single unit to mean I'm tired. When he says blue blanket, he doesn't know how to say I am tired. He says blue blanket, so that's a chunk. So they acquire language in chunks, and you're going to hear some videos of some chunks of language. It's almost like a top-down language acquisition. So, where an analytic language processor is the bottom-up, they learn one word at a time. Start at one word, all the way up to like telling you a story or conversation. A Gestalt language processor is going to have a big script, and then it's not until they get to stage 3 that they're able to dissect those scripts and take apart those words from the script to become single units of meaning. And we're going to talk about that when we get into the stages today. So their language is relatively inflexible in the early stages. We do know that most autistic children are Gestalt language processors, but not all Gestalt language processors are autistic. Are you super confused yet? Because I know it can be confusing. So single word production is, again, a later stage of development. And kids can, of course, when they're in stage 1, they can be labeling things, but it's not really meaningful other than just labeling. They don't know how to form an utterance until they get to stage 3 and 4. Yes, we know that at least 85% of autistic people are Gestalt language processors. All right, so what is a Gestalt? Have you guys heard of a Gestalt? Okay, so a Gestalt is a script or chunk of language that a child has stored for later use. It can be flexible or inflexible. So an example of an inflexible Gestalt, to infinity and beyond. How many of you are Toy Story fans? Toy Story fans? So, to infinity and beyond can be something that a child may use, but we don't really say that in our everyday lives, right? So that's an example of an inflexible Gestalt. But that is a Gestalt that has been meaningful to a child who communicates through echolalia. And so that's inflexible, but something like it's time to go or that's so much fun is flexible. Because it's time to go can change to it's time to brush your teeth, it's time to take a bath, it's time to go outside, it's time to put on our pajamas, it's time to get a snack. That's so much fun can change to that's a girl, that's a ball, that's funny, that's crazy, that's ridiculous. So we want to, because they communicate through chunks, we need to give them chunks that they can use, that they can later change into other utterances so they can diversify their language. So I'm gonna show you a bunch of those today and give you examples so that you can help your Gestalt language processor. All right, so a Gestalt is intonationally defined, so you might hear lots of intonation when the child is using that. So this little boy Harris, one time when I was at his house, he'd say, sausage in the bucket, like with a lot of enthusiasm. And I didn't know what he meant by that. I was like, sausage in the bucket, sausage in the bucket. I was trying to figure out what it meant. So I texted his mom because she wasn't there. His dad was upstairs, and because I go to their homes to see them. And the mom said, oh, that's what he means when he wants something to eat. So he has a tray that he calls a bucket because he calls everything that is a holder of something a bucket. So sausage in the bucket, he would eat sausage for breakfast, so he would say that whenever he was hungry. He's the one that would say blue blanket when he's tired, sausage in the bucket when he wanted something to eat. So he always used the same intonation. It can be a short Gestalt, it can be a long Gestalt. One word could be a short Gestalt. So it can hold a larger meaning. It's usually tied to an emotional or dramatic experience. I'm thinking back to my own son. Again, he would say light fall down on my bed, light fall down on my bed. And so he thought that the light was going to fall down on his bed. It was his way of saying he was scared. Light fall down on my bed, light fall down on my bed. And seriously, I want to go back and I'm going to analyze all the videos now. And I'm going to be like, oh, you're a Gestalt Language Processor. Yes.
Do they have scripts that don't have meaning? Like if
Yes.
you're imitating a cartoon over and over, but without seeming to have a certain part of the day that it connects with?
Yes, yes. Sometimes they can just be trying to regulate themselves, trying to soothe themselves. So they don't always have a meaning, like there's something they're trying to tell you. That's a great question, yes. So we can't take all of them literally, but we do know that a lot of their scripts do hold powerful meaning. All right, so signs of Gestalt language processing in speaking students. This is a child who's autistic, typically is a Gestalt language processor. They're going to repeat lines from TV shows, songs, or movies. You're going to often you'll hear some unintelligibility that could be a Gestalt, that they're not, because they have motor planning issues, they're not able to verbalize it specifically or precisely. But when you listen to the intonation, you can tell that they're trying to recite that Gestalt. And again, you can have kids that are stuck on single words. And these are the kids that don't seem to make progress with typical analytic language therapy. And I've done it before too, before I knew better. I was like, why are these kids not making progress? They just seem to, like those WH question goals that they never seem to master. The yes/no questions, just different things like that, and you're like, what am I doing wrong that is not allowing this child to make progress? They'll repeat questions instead of providing an answer, and that's because they're not ready for questions until they're in stage 4. So we're going to talk about that today as well. All right, signs of Gestalt language in a non or minimally speaking student. You can be a non-speaking student and be a Gestalt language processor. How crazy is that? So what you do know in these cases is that they're going to replay certain portions of a video repeatedly. They're going to go to YouTube, they're going to start it, and then they're going to stop it, start it over again, stop it, start it over again. It's going to drive you crazy. Stop it, start it, stop it, start it. That's a Gestalt language processor. They're going to hum or sing songs rhythmically, but they don't yet use words. They have preference for music, and they like to repeat play schemes the same way each time. So you might notice that, I don't know if you guys have heard of echopraxia, where they'll do these little movements. They are basically using movements from videos they've seen, and they're in their mind, they think in pictures, so they're replaying that with their body movements. That's called echopraxia. They like to keep toys in sets. They see them as wholes, and they get distressed. If a piece is missing, they fall apart. You can't take a piece away. And then they also lack progress with traditional AAC, augmentative communication. So if you've tried to do like one word at a time, then like build on that in 2-word phrases, they don't really do well with that. That's because they too need more gestalts. They don't need more words, they need more gestalts. And they're often unintelligible, but their intonation can be rich. All right, so how do we treat Gestalt language processors who are stuck in stage 1? That is through something called natural language acquisition, and we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to get into the 6 stages of natural language acquisition. This is the process that a Gestalt language processor goes through when they're developing language. Natural language acquisition is basically a framework that will move a child from delayed echolalia to self-generated speech. That's always our goal. Our goal is flexible, self-generated speech. Now, when we say to a child, say, I want help, that's not teaching them to develop flexible language. That's teaching them basically a memorized chunk of language that is not meaningful. They just know that they say that when they need help. We want them to be able to tell us independently that they want help. And we do that through natural language acquisition, because I promise you these children can learn to do this if they are given the right tools. And of course, every child is different. Some children will live in stage 1, it just depends on so many different factors, and we can talk about that today as well. And I know we only have an hour, so I'll be doing my best to try to get through everything. All right, so let's talk about the 6 stages. Stuff that gets me so excited when you tell me that. So this is one of my little boys, Nick, cutest thing on the planet. When I started with him, he was in stage 2. I just started with him about a month ago, and now he's moving into stage 3 and 4. It's really exciting. Super amazing mom, homeschools him. She has the best materials. Now this, I got on Amazon, this little set is so cute. I'm obsessed with someone who spent a lot of money on shoes. I spend a lot of money on speech toys and my dogs. But anyway, he's so cute. He loved this little toy, and you're not gonna see a video of him today, but you're gonna see some other videos. All right, so these are the 6 stages of natural language acquisition. We're gonna start in stage 1. So if you have a child that scripts a lot and they're not able to produce meaningful utterances, chances are they're in stages 1 or 2. Stage 2, mitigated gestalts, and I'm gonna go through all the details of all this in the presentation. I also talk about it in the book that I wrote, and I promise you I'm not trying to plug that, but you can also find free information on communicationdevelopmentcenter.com that will give you information about all of these as well. Stage 3 is the single words, where those single words become freed from the gestalt. So just because a child has a bunch of single words, though, doesn't mean they're in stage 3. So we'll talk about that too. Stage 4 is beginning grammar, and that's where you're going to hear some grammatically incorrect sentences. Stage 5 is more complex grammar, where they're going to start to use conjunctions like but, and so. And stage 6 is the most advanced. So I would say everybody in this room is probably, if you were a Gestalt Language Processor, we would be in stage 6. So that's where you can hold a talk grammatically correct and use the most advanced stage of grammar. Oh God, sorry, that scared me. All right, so this is RJ, and he's 5, and he had full-time ABA therapy until recently. His mom pulled him out of that. She felt like he was very dysregulated, very much in his own world. She did have him in private OT once a week for 30 minutes, private speech once a week for 30 minutes, but for a long time he was treated like an analytic language processor. So now he's in speech with me. He's been in speech with me a little bit over a year. He is an example of a child he's in stage 1 in this video. He's starting to move into stage 2, but it's a very slow process. A lot of times when kids have been in ABA therapy, it's very I'm not going to bash ABA therapy at all, I promise. It's very prompt dependent, very structured, and so it's a more difficult environment for a child to produce the self-generated language. So it's a little bit trickier for those kids. But we're going to watch a video of a stage 1 Gestalt language. Okay, so that is an example. I was really proud of that. This is one, we always got to look at the small things too. Small things can be huge wins. This child, when he began, was scripting repeatedly. Now his scripts are starting to become more relevant to the situation. So when I pulled out this toy and he started to associate it with a car wash and was singing about the car wash video was great. Another thing that it's just, their minds are so brilliant. They're so brilliant. So I brought a bunch of animals one day, and one of them was a white horse, a little toy white horse. And he kept saying, white horse, white horse, white horse, and he was saying it over and over and over again. So I was excited that he was saying that he was labeling the color. He runs to get his iPad, and his mom's like, no, you can't have your iPad, but he got it anyway, which was fine, because I knew he wanted to show me something. He has like 1 million movies on his iPad, right? Goes to a scene from Aladdin, where Aladdin is on a white horse. White horse! And he took the white horse and he put it up to the video, white horse, And he looked at me and smiled, and I was like, almost cried. Like, it makes me almost cry now. But like, so many times we can think these kids don't, just because they're in this stage, that they don't have anything to say, that they don't understand. I promise you they do. So, that's an example of a stage 1, and we're gonna talk about what we do with a stage 1 Gestalt Language Processor. So it's always important to be a detective. When your child is using scripts, you want to figure out where they're coming from. You want to figure out what they're trying to convey by producing that. So the example like sausage in the bucket that I talked about, the blue blanket. What do they mean by this if they're saying it over and over again? So for this little boy in the previous video I just showed was just trying to tell me a white horse he saw in Aladdin, and he just wanted to show me, oh, this reminds me of the white horse in Aladdin. And his mom said that was one of his favorite movies. All right, so what do we do when our child scripts? We definitely don't want to ignore it. So we want to acknowledge the child. When your child is saying something to you and you don't know what they're trying to tell you, say, oh, really? Okay. And you nod your head, because so often these children are used to their scripts being ignored. So you want to show them, okay, what you're saying means something to me, and they're feeling seen and heard. You're going to listen to what they're trying to say, and then you can also try to sing or repeat the gestalts back to them and pay attention to the melodies that are important to them. I had a little girl that loved to sing the ABCs all the time. She would do that over and over and over again. And so you take a tune that they like, and you can put language into it. So, for example, if your child is needing to go to bed and they love the ABCs, you can sing to them. Now it's time to go to bed, next time won't you come with me? So you're taking something that's meaningful to them, and you're giving them new language for it, and it's going to help them to acquire that language more naturally. Now it's time to leave this back, don't leave the table, don't come back, or, yeah, come on back. So just, you can be creative with this and think about whatever tune is important to them, giving that language. And again, just being a detective. Most of the time their gestalts are literal and they have some form of meaning. I'm trying to communicate something to you. So if your child is repeating things over and over again, be a detective. I have a mom that will write the gestalts down on paper, or she'll put them in a Google Doc when we want to notice where and when they're using the script and put the pieces of the puzzle together. Did they acquire the script from a song? Then we can go to the song and we can see what maybe they were trying to mean. A movie, a show, you can go, like I had a little boy in the school system, and he would say Pinocchio, and he would cry. So his dad said that Pinocchio was his favorite movie, but there was a scene where Pinocchio was crying, and so whenever the little boy was sad, he would say Pinocchio. So that was his gestalt for I'm sad. So his dad was a detective and figured that out when I asked him about it. All right, so you want to model language naturally throughout the day for your child when they're in stage 1. Make your voice interesting, vary your intonation. Don't force your child to say anything. See, we don't want to say ball, say daddy, because when they're in stage 1, also when they're in stage 2, they're still repeating you, so they're going to say ball, say daddy. So we want to talk like we are the child. We want to use first person pronouns, I, me, we, my, instead of you. You need to do blah, blah, blah. You need to do this. You're washing your hands. They're going to repeat what you're saying to them. So we need to talk like we are the child. So just making sure, of course, that we don't say this, say that. And that's going to help the spontaneous language to emerge. So when you want to follow your child's lead, so this is what we do in speech. I usually bring a few toys, and I'll let the child that I'm working with pick out the toy he wants to play with, he or she wants to play with. And they're going to be a lot more likely to retain what you're teaching them when they're interested in what you're giving them. So an example for me is I hate math, right? I don't know. Any other math hate? No, I don't want to say haters. We shouldn't say that word. Any non-math lovers out there? Okay. So math is something I'm not interested in. So if you start talking to me about numbers, I'm gonna glaze over, right? But if you start talking to me about my dogs or exercise or something I'm interested in, I'm gonna be really enthusiastic and interested in that. Same thing for a Gestalt Language Processor. If we follow their lead and what they're interested in, they're gonna be a lot more likely to retain the language that we're modeling for them because it's gonna be a meaningful or shared experience. So we're gonna narrate our day and talk about what we're doing while we're doing it, and it's important, so like you could say, let's go outside when we're going outside, because we're talking for the child. I'm gonna take a nap. It's important to not ask questions in a stage, so again, they're not ready for that until they're in stage 4. So just talking like you are your child is really important when they're in stage 1.
I have a quick question.
Yes,
When
absolutely.
they're doing the scripting, you said to say like, okay, all right, my student will get aggressive if I don't follow his script. And so if I say, okay, he says no, say, all right. And so in one of my ABA classes, they were saying, change the script and give them something else. So I tried to say like, have you ever been to the zoo? And he'll repeat it. I said, Daisy is getting in the boat, okay? And I said, all right. He says, say okay. And he'll get mad at me.
I would just say,
keep
I would
following
just
the
say
script?
okay. I mean, I would just say okay.
He'll do it all day, like 25 times a day, the same script, and you have to stop your lesson and repeat exactly what he wants to say, and then he'll walk away, and 5 minutes later, he starts all over again. So I didn't know, do we change it? And I thought ignoring him, but then he started throwing stuff around my room. So I'm like, okay, follow along.
That's a really good question. That's tricky. So I might have to answer you after this.
Yeah,
That would be
that's perfect.
that's a great question though. Yeah, because every child is so different, and you don't. That is the tricky thing about being in the school. You can't disrupt everybody in the classroom. Completely understand. So let me talk to you after we're done with that. Okay, so one of my kids would say the wheels on the bus whenever he wanted to go somewhere. And so what we want to do is give him we want to give him a meaningful script for that. So we want to give them a variety of gestalts before they move into stage 2. And I'm about to show you some of those that you can model for your stage 1 Gestalt Language Processor. So what types of gestalts they might need? Commenting gestalts. So that's, instead of saying, water bottle, you would say, that's a water bottle. That's enough. That's okay. That's a dog. That's funny. That's crazy. So that's is a great one to use. Shared joy. So when you're excited about something, I love it. Wow, so cool. So you're just giving them different things they can say when they're excited about something. Transitions, when you're going from one thing to another. What's next? Or it's time to go, it's time to eat, it's time to play. Suggesting activities, let's play, let's take a path, let's go. Requesting or asking, how about? So when it's time for snack, how about a snack? How about a drink? And then we always want to teach them to protest or advocate for themselves. Stop it, I need a break, it's too loud, things like that. So these are just some examples of gestalts that your child might need when they're in stage 1. All right, when we're working with stage 1, AAC is very important. There are no prerequisites for AAC or augmentative communication, and some of my favorite apps are Touch Chat, so I've listed those there, and Lamp Words for Life is another one. So it is not going to hurt their language, it is not going to hurt their speech development. If anything, it's going to help them to become more verbal, more communicative. A lot of times parents are worried about that, but there is no prerequisite. We don't need to use PECs. They give them immediate access to a robust system and model it naturally without any expectation. So we don't say, touch this, touch that, touch this. You model it for the child, they watch you do that, even if they aren't watching you, they're seeing you do it, and it needs to be done throughout their day naturally, not just in your speech session or in your classroom. Mom needs to be modeling it at home, teacher needs to be modeling it throughout the day, otherwise they're not going to be able to use it efficiently. So that's for when I'm wearing non-speaking Gestalt Language Processor. Sorry, hold on. All right, so this is a stage 2 Gestalt Language Processor, 5 years old. He's in a full-time self-contained classroom, and he's in private OT once a week for 30 minutes, and speech twice a week. He works with me. So anyway, this is an example of a stage 2 Gestalt Language Processing clip. What he has done, have any of you heard of the song Mommy Finger? Mommy Finger, where are you? So he got these little animals that I had, and he's putting them on, and he's changing that to panda finger, giraffe finger. So in stage 2, they start to change a script. So he had always scripted, Mommy Finger, where are you? Now he's changing it by putting his own words in there. So here's an example of the stage 2.
Nothing your panda finger, where are you?
That's his brother.
Here I am, how do you do?
All right, so his dad's on the spectrum, his brother's on the spectrum, and his mom's neurodivergent. They're an amazing family. They are so much fun to work with. So, anyway, that's an example of a stage 2, and I'm sorry that I'm starting to fall through this and realize we're getting pressed for time. All right, so this is also a stage 2. This is an example of a stage 2 Gestalt Language Processor. In this video clip, you're going to see Jake. He's 3 years old. He's in full-time pre-K, part-time ABA, private OT, and private Gestalt language therapy once a week for 30 minutes. It is the number 3.
It's a number 4.
That's right.
5.
That's an example of echo practicing it.
I've done 7.
That's the mitigation.
Good. I see 8. I did 9. 10.
Isn't he so cute? He's the one whose mom just texted me saying he's scripting repeatedly right now, but he's actually in stage 4 now. All right, so the mitigation stage. So I don't know if you've heard the word mitigation. That's when they change what they have used previously in a script. And another example of this is that they're going to trim down gestalts. So I had a little boy who would say, Miss Kim, do you like avocado lollipops? Because that's a video on YouTube. So he trimmed it down when he was moving into stage 2 and say, do you like lollipops? So he's starting to make it shorter. And then when we were outside playing with his neighbor's horses, he said, Horsey, do you like lollipops? So they start to kind of play around with it. And they also start to mix and match in this stage. So an example is, okay, one of my little boys would say, stop the music every time I would start to sing, because he didn't like that. I don't know if any of you have Gestalt Language Processors. No, stop, all done. So now he says stop. So he trimmed it down. And then they mix and match parts of Gestalt. So we gotta get out of here, can change to get out of here, mommy. Or we gotta go see mommy. So they're starting to take chunks from previous Gestalts and put them together to make their own utterances. All right, so here's some examples of mixing and matching. When I was playing with Play-Doh with one of my little boys, he would say, make a circle, make a square, make a heart. So those are all examples of mitigations. If he said make a circle for everything we were doing, that would be a stage 1, because he wasn't able to change it at the end or in any part of the utterance. Do you want to go upstairs? Do you want to clean up? Do you want to eat bread? let's go upstairs. Time to go upstairs. So what they're doing is basically mixing and matching chunks of language. And a good way to figure out if it's a stage 2 is to write down all the utterances your child is producing. Keep them in a Google Doc, keep them in a place, just where you can start to look at chunks. Because even now, for me, stages 2 and 4 can get a little tricky if you don't truthfully know all their chunks. You might think, oh, this is a stage 4, this is where they're starting to produce independent utterances on their own. So it's always good to keep track of that as much as you can, as much as time allows, which I know we're all pressed for time. I totally get it. We live in 2023. Time is crazy. All right, so when your child's in stage 2, we want to use redundancy when we're modeling language for our child. Instead of just modeling something one way, we provide a variety of different ways. So in the following example, the redundancy is I'm, and so you'd say, I'm gonna get a drink, I'm so happy, I'm gonna go. So just changing what you're saying and modeling those utterances for the child. And again, we want to avoid the use of you and yours so that we keep our child from having those pronoun reversals. All right, in stage 2, your child might want to spend a lot of time in this stage. We don't want to rush them. We never want to push them into another stage. We want to follow them there. They'll show us they're ready when 50% or more of their utterances are in a particular stage. So we find out by taking repeated language samples. And a language sample is unprompted. We're not going to tell them to say something. We're not going to ask them questions. We're just simply going to watch them play, and we're going to write down what they're saying. And if they say something to us, we can say, oh, okay. Or, just like acknowledge what they're saying, but we're not going to give them things to say. Let's see, okay? Sorry, I'm starting to fly through this. All right, so here's an example of how to model mitigations for let's. This is a great one to do when your child is in stage 1 and 2. Let's go upstairs, let's go outside, let's go to school, let's take a bath. So you're just modeling this naturally for your child without the expectation that they're going to have to say this. Let's get bubbles, let's wash our hands. So that's an example of one. All right, that's okay, that's enough, that's amazing, that's an airplane, that's a dog. So that is also another one. So what you're basically doing is you're giving them a chunk that they can use with their utterances that they can later mitigate or change them into independent utterances. Okay, how about a drink? These are all things that you can model for your child when you're wanting to give them access to more language. How about a drink? How about a snack? How about some help? How about a bath? Always with the expectation that they don't have to say it back to us, but we know that Gestalt Language Processors are auditory. They pick up language by overhearing it. Even when it seems like they're not listening, I promise you they are. So the more you model it, the more natural it's going to be that they pick it up. That's how they memorize those songs from YouTube that you never modeled for them, because they learn by overhearing. So we're going to give them language the way that they learn it, and that's auditorily. What's next? What's for dinner? What's happening? So those are some other ones that you could model for them. All right, it's dirty, it's sticky, it's yucky, it's so much fun. So again, talking like you are the child and just talking about what they're doing. It's time to go, it's time to take a bath, it's time to clean up, it's time to eat, it's time to wake up. So I'm trying to fly through this because we're really pressed for time. You know what, do you guys want me to continue or do you want me to answer questions? Because we've got because this goes to 10:45, right? So we got about 6 minutes left. Do you want me to show
us the stages and we can take a picture?
Do what?
Later? Could you at least show us the other stages
Yes.
so we can take a picture?
Absolutely. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and again, I go through all the detail on this in the ebook that I have, but you can also find it on communicationdevelopmentcenter.com. It has a lot of free information. All right, so this is stage 3. Stage 3 is the magic stage. That's where children start to see single words as units. You're going to see pointing in this stage, which is a sign of joint attention. Their joint attention is going to, now not all autistic children will point, but I have seen a lot of my Gestalt language processors point when they're in stage 3. So this is the magic stage. All right. Okay. All right. This is an example of some speech with a stage 3. Big bubbles. More bubbles. Bubbles out. So I'm putting space between the words so they see that the single words are units, and so that they're not a chunk. If I say big bubbles, they might see that as a chunk of language, so I have to individually space the words out. All right, so let's see, whoops, hold on. All right, so stage 4 is when original phrases and sentences begin. They're going to start to experiment with grammar. Do not worry about grammar until they're in stage 4. This is when you're going to hear incorrect grammar. And I'll show you an example of what you might hear. So it's totally fine, and we don't want to be the grammar police and try to correct them. Like I always used to do that with my own kids. But we want them to be confident, to be able to communicate, and we don't want to try to correct them so that they can have that confidence and want to continue to experiment with grammar. So they might say things like, her guts drink, mine doggy cute, him's there too, not drink it, Fido not drink. All right, and then we're going to use the DSS and the DST. I know this is like a lot. I am going to talk about this in my next presentation too. But these are charts that we use when your child gets to, this is what we use when they get to stage 3. And this is how you can model language to help support them when they're in stage 3. And this is how you can model language to support them when they're in stages 4, 5, and 6. I know it's kind of blurry. But if you guys want, you can write my email down and I will email this to you, okay? It's KimberlyJenkins@yahoo.com. And then I'm also going to show you my social media. You can contact me that way as well. Okay, so then when they get to stage 5, that's where the advanced grammar is going to come in. That's where you're going to start to, they're ready for the WH questions when they're in stage 4. They're going to be ready for the conjunctions, but, so, or, if, because, when they're in stage 5. And we want to have access to these charts so that we can model the language that they need, the language that will resonate with them when they're in stage 5. And I'm going to show you a Gestalt Language Processor. He's in stage 5.
Oh, is this the eyes?
That is an ornament.
Ornament. Oh, go on here.
Yes, we do put ornaments on the Christmas tree.
Let's see.
Tell me about this ornament.
The ornament is red.
Yes.
And we put it up the Christmas tree.
Yes. The ornament is red.
The ornament is red.
It's red. Okay, and then I have one more video. Oh, no, never mind. All right, so stage 6 is complete grammar. Stage 6 is the most advanced stage. So we're gonna hear lots of embedded clauses, and it is the most advanced stage. And that chart, the DSS, that I showed you that had the 2 pictures, that helps you model things for stage 6. And this can continue throughout a child's lifetime. They can continue to get to this stage. So a stage 4 utterance, mommy eat hash browns, in stage 5 can become, I think mommy ate the hash browns I put in our fridge yesterday. Stage 6, I think it's possible that mommy or daddy got into the fridge and ate my hash browns. So it changes over time. And stage 6 is the most advanced. Alright, so let's see, sorry. I'm so sorry, I'm having a... Alright, so here's my contact. I also have a Teachers Pay Teacher store that I have a lot of resources on there. But this is if you, the book is $27. And these are my social media. My email is kimberlyjenkins@yahoo.com. If you have any questions or you need any free resources, and if you want to ask me about a kid you have, I would love to help you. So please email me, and I'm sorry that I flew through everything and we didn't get to everything. But I'm going to go through all those stages again in the next presentation. But thank you guys so much for coming. You were amazing.